Whilst Rory was lighting up fireworks with Marseille fans outside the Spurs hotel, Serie C managers were causing havoc by throwing focaccia. One thing's for sure, though, football is never dull. Welcome to the Anglo-Italian podcast. My name is Adam, and I'm joined by my good friend,
Andy.
Fantastic. Now, as you can see, unfortunately, we're not joined by Rory this week. He had to be called away. However, we will do our very best job to cover off all the key stories that took place this week, as well as preview the week ahead, as well as the weekend, more to the point. But before we go any further, Andy, how has your week been?
Yeah, it's been a busy one, to be fair. Quite busy with work and things like that. But happy to be sat here on a Thursday night as normal, talking about the football. So yeah, how are you, mate?
Yeah, keeping well. I have to say, it seems like it's the quiet period before the storm happens, because I think we've got a hell of a lot of football to look forward to in the weekend itself. But yeah, keeping well, thank you. So I suppose let's delve into it, and we'll go into the Champions League that took place this week. So obviously it was the conclusion of a lot of these group stages for a lot of the teams that we anticipated. Pretty much foregone conclusion, it has to be said. So if I just run down the teams that have qualified to the next stage, and we'll kind of talk about the key kind of stories that take place over the last few days. So in Group A, we've got Napoli and Liverpool that have qualified. Ajax have qualified for the Europa place. In Group B, we've got FC Porto, top of that group, ahead of Club Brugge. Club Brugge, who have done amazingly well, and Leverkusen did qualify for the Europa spot ahead of Atletico Madrid, which was a bit of a surprise to many. Group C, we saw Bayern Munich and Inter Milan qualify for the next stages. Barcelona get that sole Europa League spot, should I say. Group D is where we said it was going to be quite feisty. So we did see Spurs, much to the heartache of Rory, and Frankfurt qualify for the next stages. Sporting Lisbon did qualify for the Europa League spot. Surprising that, I thought they would be the ones that would control the second place, but Frankfurt pulled it off. Looking at Group E, Chelsea and Milan, not surprised there, I suppose, but Salzburg were the Europa spots. And then in Group F, we've got Real Madrid and Leipzig ahead of Shakhtar Donetsk. Group G, we've got Man City, Dortmund and Sevilla, surprisingly, claiming that Europa spot. And then finally in Group H, Benfica, top of this group, believe it or not, ahead of PSG and Juventus, just crawling over the line to make it into Europa League spots. Andy, if I just pass it over to yourself, what was the kind of call-out game for yourself this week?
Well, the most hilarious one was Real Madrid and Celtic. So, like I said, it was a full conclusion in terms of the ramifications of the group. So there was never going to be any change in that one. But there was 3 penalties given. I believe the referee that ref the game was, I think, it was the first woman to be managing a Champions League game, to my knowledge. So that was quite an historical event in itself. But yeah, there was some hilarious defending. There was 2 handballs, which resulted in penalties. Which are Rodrigo and Luka Modric, who became the oldest, I think the oldest player to score a penalty in the Champions League. I think is the correct stat with that one. I mean, he just keeps going like he doesn't age, that bloke. Vinicius Junior missed from like 4 or 5 yards and was able to laugh about it. Don't think he'll get too many more occasions in which he can get away with that. No, it was let's say game. I think Celtic have given it a go, but a bit like they have in the other games, they just don't take their chances, and then they get ruthlessly exposed at the back. I think the game was more or less over on there. The consolation by Jota, the Portuguese winger, I think was good, to be fair. But yeah, I feel that especially against the results against Shakhtar Donetsk, I feel they probably feel they could have done better in those games. But they've backed the Champions League money, so I guess they'll just go again next year.
Exactly. Has there been any kind of sides that you're surprised that didn't progress to the next stage? I mean, thinking about it on the spot, Atletico Madrid seems to be the biggest shock out of the group stages at this
absolutely.
Anyway.
Because I think when those teams are put together, you would have banked, because obviously Leverkusen haven't been without their problems in the Bundesliga this season. Aside from Porto, you feel that they have the quality of players to do it. But I think what you're seeing now is that maybe Diego Simeone's style isn't quite working. They've got, the likes of João Felix seems to be quite unhappy there. Like, it feels very much like it's a cycle coming to an end. I think they haven't played particularly well for quite a long time. And I think maybe it wasn't a shock in the grand scheme of things, but certainly going back to August, I would have expected them to at least finish, at worst second. So I think that was the main shock with that one. Other than that, I feel the other groups have gone where they have. I mean, a lot of people would say that it was a shock that Juventus had dropped down into Europa League, but we've talked about Juve a lot this season. I can't. Obviously, Max Allegri is still in a job, so fair play. Most managers wouldn't have kept it, but I think because of the financial situation, they're forced to stick with him.
Yeah, definitely.
I think there was a few shocks, but if we're being honest, like, most of the groups have panned out more or less as I expected to. And I think the last 16 will be the interesting one, because obviously one of the teams that has finished top is going to draw PSG in the next round. And that'll be, although PSG have only finished second, Messi's in the form of, is in very good form at the moment. And despite all the off the pitch nonsense, mostly involving Mbappe, they are playing quite good football at the moment. So, yeah.
Yeah, no, definitely. And just to kind of touch on that group, I have to say Benfica look an outsider at this stage. I don't know if you saw any of the goals against Maccabi Haifa, but they were clinical. They were absolutely clinical, and they're on a fantastic run with Roger Schmidt in charge. I mean, is there any other kind of sides that you think that are outside of the regular kind of speculative kind of group of maybe teams that you expect to maybe be at the latter stages of this Champions League that you think might challenge at this point?
Well, I think you can't obviously discount AC Milan. They've qualified for their first knockout group since 2011. They are the reigning Serie A champions as well. So although they've had a bit of a tricky week in the league, their Champions League performance has been very, very solid. I think apart from their games against Chelsea, which are probably unlucky in both occasions, in what is essentially a one-off game, I feel that they could put a performance together. And also Porto as well. They seem to get written off every year. And then in the quarterfinal ever. I mean, I've been watching a few. Their goalkeeper, Diogo, he's very, very good. Diogo Costa, for 23 years old, seen as the next sort of here to like Alisson, Ederson, and that kind of thing, and sort of like Manchester United been linked with heavily. So yeah, I think. What about you? Who do you think will be your potential surprise package?
Oh, I don't know. I have to say, looking at other sides, I mean, with the exception of Milan, I would possibly say Benfica, just purely because of what I saw on that. I think it was on yesterday's evening's matches. I thought they looked like quite short, and I appreciate it was only Maccabi Haifa, but they had a lot of kind of pace. They had a lot of maturity on the ball, and they just seemed to be just tacking like teams down. And I think it's interesting that they kind of reflected on Darwin Nunes being the only player to be sold this summer as kind of a blessing in that respect,
Yeah,
because they expected a few more players to be touted to be moving on. But that signing alone, in terms of moving on, meant that they could rebuild their squad, still add some
keep the players
quality,
they've got.
and
Yeah.
keep the players exactly. So for me, I think they really stand out as the potential like dark horses, should we say? I'm not very good at those predictions. It has to be said. You know that too well.
Well, I know. I
Um,
think ever since we predicted Turkey as a dark horse in the
yes,
Euros last year, I feel like we're in no authority to
definitely not.
talk about
Definitely
dark horse.
not.
That doesn't mean we're not going to talk about it because
No,
we
we've
would
got an
have a
opinion, right? It
yeah,
counts to a
exactly.
degree, but
Just
yeah.
don't go to the bookies on our account whatsoever.
Exactly. But Andy, I wanted to talk about Spurs as well. So they did manage to get the result at the end of the day. They did beat Marseille 2-1. As Højbjerg, even should I say, was about to plant the second goal, you saw Igor Tudor screaming at his defense. I don't know if you saw the scenes of that at least.
I mean, he wasn't happy.
Yeah,
I mean, it's typical Marseille. They do have a habit of just absolutely fucking it. In the last minute, they always do it. They start off so encouragingly. Obviously there was a lot of talk about ex Arsenal players in the lineup. There was also an ex Newcastle player in Chelsea
yeah,
Mbemba.
Mbemba. Yeah.
So it was like a Premier League year 2015 or something in Marseille at the moment. But no, I think it's weird. Højbjerg's been popping out with a few little goals lately, hasn't he?
Yes, yeah.
But he's not really much of a goal scorer, generally speaking. But
No.
no, he's been very good. There's also, on the side note, a really good interview where he talked about his dad passing away when he was really
Mm.
really young, and yeah, it's one of those players that sort of warmed to me in recent months. But yeah, I think
Yeah, no, definitely.
given the last minute drama of the Spurs game just a week ago in the Champions League, I think he'll be very very glad. He'd be very very glad that he's a good outcome there.
No, definitely. And what draws me to this point is, do you think this result may kickstart their season? Because obviously they've been on this kind of dodgy run, it has to be said, because they haven't been playing fantastically. But when you look at their position, you're like, well, if someone didn't know how Spurs played, you go, they're a decent side. They're still in the Champions League. They're still within a shout of the top four in the Premier League, should I say. So you kind of look at it from an outsider point of view and go, they must be a good side. But we know this; they haven't been playing very well. That's a typical Conte style of football. But do you think this might come at the right time for them? What do you think?
I think the right time with them will probably be the World Cup, and they get a bit of a break.
Yeah.
It's difficult to say because they're very very inconsistent. I
Mm,
think the struggle with Spurs has been able to put some performances together, but I think one thing you can't accuse them of not being able to do is find the net. They do usually find the net in games. They had the comeback win against Bournemouth. They've had the comeback win against Marseille as well, but probably arguably chalked off one against Sporting Lisbon.
mm,
So I think there's definitely the team spirit and there's definitely the attacking ability to be able to do it. I think it's just to do it on a consistent basis that's been the issue. I think the litmus test will be against Liverpool at home this weekend because generally speaking, they've done all right against the teams you would expect them to.
mm.
But whenever in their games so far against big six or top half opposition in the likes of Newcastle, Man United, Arsenal, they haven't performed particularly well. So Yeah, I think it's a difficult one to judge, to be perfectly honest, because you don't know. Every time I watch Spurs, you don't know what you're going to get. You're either going to get the Spurs side that battered Leicester 6-2, or you're going to get the one that were absolutely woeful against Manchester United a week or so ago. So yeah.
Yeah, this is true. Before we kind of conclude this Champions League section, a word for our friend Craig. Rangers, obviously, officially the worst side at this group stage
Ever. Yeah.
ever. I'm sure he's drowning his sorrows right now. I don't know what to say. Rangers, what did you make of their performance against Ajax?
It's the same it's been in the other 5 games. I mean, I was talking about Celtic earlier, is the fact that they've at least, given it a go, whereas they've just been shit. I think there's no other way that you can put it. They've just not been good enough from start to finish, and pretty much every single game they've conceded an early goal. I think apart from the first half against Liverpool, they've not looked in any way like being competitive. And I think that's a real shame, because the European performances over the past couple of years have been good, but I think there's a lot of their players, like the likes of like Tavernier, who've whose levels have dropped quite considerably. They didn't, I've said before, they didn't refresh their squad as much as I thought they would, because at the end of the day, they're still in their centre mid, they're rocking up in centre mid with Scott Arfield and Steve Davis, who were getting on a bit. That was their centre mid going back 3 years ago. They're playing Jamie Sands, who's an out of position midfielder. Obviously, apart from Kolak, who was probably the only real potential upgrade to their starting 11. It's largely the same team as it was last season. Alan McGregor obviously still playing, because obviously they tried briefly with McLaughlin to give somebody else a go at the number 1 spot, but they haven't got anybody, any sort of quality players. And I know a lot of fans are quite disappointed that they didn't invest as much as they should have done. So yeah, I think barring a few good results and a result against Celtic, like I can honestly see Van Bronckhorst being out of the job by the new year.
Yeah, definitely looks like that. And just before we conclude this section, I wanted to add that the listener will probably see the news already, but we just saw it before we went in to record. Gerard Piqué has officially said he's going to retire, so he's going to have his last match this weekend. Andy, thoughts on his career? I mean, is it going to be played by the last few years, or do you think he'll get credit for what he's achieved at Barcelona?
I think he deserves a huge amount of credit for what he's achieved in his career. He's won, a couple of European championships. He's won a World Cup. He's won the Champions League multiple times, the League multiple times. He's one of the most decorated players in Premier League. Well, sorry, not Premier League, but in football in history, and especially in Barcelona. I mean, all right, the past 3 or 4 years haven't gone to plan, but at his peak, along with Sergio Ramos, he was one of the best centre backs in the world. He's a very good modern ball playing centre back. He was even at Manchester United for a spell early in his career, and I felt that he arrived probably a few years too soon for us to really make much use out of him. But I think he deserves a lot of credit. Apparently, the game against this weekend against Granada. I think it's going to be his farewell. And I think he deserves it, absolutely. I mean, not to mention off the pitch, he's helped Barcelona out financially by reducing his contract demands and sacking off his pay rises year on year. He's very much a Catalan lad through and through, and he's the sort of guy I could see being like a president of Barca in the future and things like that. He's got quite an impressive business portfolio. So I think he deserves a lot of credit.
Yeah, fair play. Right, let's move on to the preview. So this weekend, listener, we are blessed that we will have the FA Cup. So yes, the famous FA Cup, Andy. Let's kind of get your thoughts on the FA Cup. What does the FA Cup mean to you?
Oh, the FA Cup, I think for me, I've always had a fondness for it. I feel like it's a competition that you go out there to win. Even as a Manchester United fan over the years, I guess a lot of younger fans, we're in our 30s, but I got a lot of younger fans maybe don't necessarily see the importance of it. But for me, I've always loved the FA Cup. It's given me some, really, really fun memories over the years. If you go back to Ryan Giggs in 1999, that was one of my fondest memories. And then, my not so fond memories. I remember the 2005 FA Cup final. We battered Arsenal from start to finish, and they did us on penalties. It was an absolute travesty that they won that. I remember we got cheated out of a treble in 2008 because of when Portsmouth won it. But you've also got the other stories. I guess as a Wickham fan, you've also got super fond memories of the FA Cup.
Yeah, no, definitely. I remember going to a lot of those games during our famous FA Cup run in 2000, 2001. So just to give the listener a bit of a backdrop, it was the season that a famous person from Teletext appeared in the quarterfinal stage to head the winner against Leicester City. But that season, we previously hadn't gone any further than the third round of the FA Cup. So when we played Grimsby Town on that particular run, it was amazing to kind of progress to the next stage, which was round 4. So we played Wolves in the snow, believe it or not. We had to clear the pitch just to make sure the game went on. And amazingly, we won that match 2-1. And yeah, I mean, for me, when I was watching that, I was just epic because we saw it on Match of the Day, the scenes. It was like glorious because you kind of, at that point, I think the FA Cup had lost a bit of its nostalgia. And I wonder, Andy, I'm sure we'll kind of talk about it, but is there an element that it's lost a bit of its prestige because of the amount of football that we're going through right now? And I think COVID has probably accelerated that maybe demand for better kind of competitions, layouts, etc. Because we appreciate that the teams are going through a lot of fixtures at the moment, and it almost takes a shine off the FA Cup. Because Rory mentions about the Coppa Italia only a few weeks ago and how they do not give a shit in Italy, whereas the FA Cup still holds a little bit of prestige because it's worldwide. It's kind of people around the world kind of look at this competition and look at the stories like a Wycombe Wanderers. And we're going to go through a few of our picks, aren't we, Andy, about teams that potentially could cause a shock this weekend. But we were kind of trying to work out, where are these teams from? Because we've never heard of them. That's the beauty of the FA Cup, isn't it, really?
We literally live in this country. And before we came in there, I was just like, I've literally Googled on my search histories, where the fuck is Alverchurch?
Yeah.
Literally never heard of it in my entire life. But it's I think it has lost a little bit of its shine, because I think, and it's partly due to the amount of money that's in the Premier League, and that seems to have a knock-on effect because you see the likes of Wigan, for example, they won the FA Cup, but they dropped down into the Championship, which led to financial ruin. And although the fans will have that memory forever, the club chairman probably secretly would have just liked to have won the stayed in the Premier League.
Up, yeah.
And I think that's a difficulty with it, because if you're a bottom of the table Premier League team, or you're fighting it out for relegation and you've got limited resources and you've got a tough league game, you're kind of like, well, I'm going to I've got a relegation dogfight on. I'm going to put out the reserves, or pick players who don't play so much and give an opportunity. And I think and you've seen a lot of that over the years. I mean, I see the likes of Newcastle actively trying to get themselves knocked out as soon as possible. But I think it depends on clubs. I think there are certain clubs out there that have always treated the World Cup FA Cup with respect. Like Chelsea always put out strong sides in the FA Cup, and they've got a very good record of winning it.
Yeah.
Arsenal have always, treated it with a lot of respect, generally speaking. I think Manchester United tend to do as well, apart from the year they didn't play in it back in 2001. I remember the
which they've regretted since.
Oh yeah, that was right or there that one. But Yeah, I think there's still a lot of teams that treat it fondly. With Leicester City winning it not too long ago as well. Manchester City have always been quite competitive in it, mainly because they've just got 3 or 4 squads they could put out. But yeah, I think for me, all they need to do with the FA Cup is just offer a Champions League place, and you'll see a difference overnight.
Oh yeah,
Like
massively.
honestly, if you win the FA Cup, you'll get Champions League football. You would not see a weakened side from a Premier League team at all. I can absolutely guarantee it, and that'll be incredible for the other teams that play them.
Yeah.
So yeah, but no, I love it still. Every time
Yeah.
I watch Manchester United in it, I've always looked at it. I've never once gone, oh, it's the FA Cup, I can't be arsed of this. I'm like, oh, we could win this season. This is a trophy, and that's the way I've always treated it.
Yeah. Do you think? Like, I'm just thinking, just broadly now. Do you think we've got too many cup competitions? Because we've got the League Cup, we've got the FA Cup, and then if you think about the team like Man United, etc., they have the UEFA Cup, Europa Cups, should I say? Sorry, Champions League. Then you've got the club competitions. Otherwise, outside of that, I mean, do you think there's just too much football? And is there kind of reforms that need to be done on these cup competitions just to make them a bit more competitive or just more enjoyable?
Yeah, I've never been like a huge fan of the Carling Cup or League Cup, if you just call it, because there's so many sponsors over the years. I've never been like a huge fan of it and if you look at a lot of other European countries, like Portugal ditched theirs in recent years. I think France have ditched their League Cup, and the rest of the countries just don't have that competition. I think there should always be a domestic cup competition, but I think the amount of games that I played, then yeah, I've long thought that's probably not really necessary. However, I think there's also, if I take my supporting a big club head off it, there is also the other side of it where, well, I've seen a lot of people go, well, my club, in your case, Wickham, they'll play 46 games a season just in the
league alone.
alone. Then you've got the abomination that is the EFL trophy, which just adds
which is terrible.
Which is just adds. I mean, that should be scrapped as well.
Yeah.
I mean, that adds another few unnecessary games. And then you've obviously got the League Cup, and you've also got the FA Cup. So I think it's a tough one because the lower league clubs will argue they play pretty much the same amount of games as most Premier League clubs do. And they go, well, we put up with it fine. And they rely on the League Cup games and FA Cup games to bring in much needed revenue and TV money. So, yeah, I think it's one of those things where whichever way you go about it, I think there's going to be a group of people that are unhappy. I would personally vote to scrap it, but I know for a fact there would be lots and lots of, I'd scrap the EFL trophy, I would scrap the League Cup and just put the focus on the FA Cup. But I know there's probably a lot of people who support, especially lower league clubs, that probably disagree. So,
well, I don't know. I think there is an element of we are playing too much football. Certainly, it's been highlighted that you're talking about the ecosystem as well, and the amount of energy that's being wasted, from travel, commutes, and just the impact it has on players as well. The recovery times are shortened because they've got more games to fit in. So I think there would be a general positive, but I appreciate for someone that nostalgically loves the cup competitions, I'm sure they're going to be a bit disgruntled. So yeah, we'll park that to the side, but we'll go through our games for the weekend that will take place with the FA Cup in specifically. So for you listeners, you might be hearing this and going, what's on that Friday night? Well, we have got to start off the previous giant killers, Hereford, taking on the previous FA Cup winners, which is weird for me to shout out because they're in the same league as Wickham. It's Portsmouth. So that already is a juicy tie, Andy. But what are the other games that you picked out from this weekend as well?
Well, there's some top to bottom clashes. So you've got obviously Ipswich, one of the biggest clubs in League One at the moment, playing at Bracknell Town, who are in the Southern Premier League. So that's going to be, so you've got a huge support and a lot of history, UEFA Cup winners. So they've got, that's a massive massive game for them. And then there's also a few where, as we discussed before, I literally had to Google. You've got like Buxton and Merthyr Town. And I was like, wait a second, Merthyr Town, but I think it is slight difference to Merthyr Tydfil.
Yeah.
So yeah, I didn't think there was another Welsh team in the English system, if that makes sense. So yeah, that'll be a good one. AFC Fylde and Gillingham. Fylde have had some good FA Cup runs over the years. They do tend to have a habit of getting through to the first round. There's also some quite interesting local ones near me. So you've got MK Dons versus Taunton. Like I said, Somerset club that are typically in the Southern Premier League. I think maybe once or twice have been in the Conference South. So there's some great ones on there. I think Wicked Ones versus Walsall. That's quite a big game, really. They're both both want to play both the higher ranked teams in the league. And then the one I had to Google earlier, which was Cheltenham Town versus Alverchurch, which is actually reasonably local in terms of proximity. Because Alverchurch, as I said, is a small parish town somewhere in Worcestershire. Quite why they're playing in the Southern Premier League, I'm not 100% sure, but I don't do
non-league pyramid for you. We will have to cover that another time.
Yeah. So yeah, I think it's going to be some great stories over this weekend. So yeah, I'm very much looking forward. What games are you looking forward to on your side?
Well, the ones in addition to the ones you said. So on Saturday we've got Chippenham Town versus Lincoln City. I expect Chippenham. Chippenham have got a history of like pulling off these shocks, so I do fancy that to be kind of maybe a game to watch out for. Charlton Athletic have got Colville Town, so again that could be a banana skin potentially for Charlton Athletic there. But there's some big ones on Sunday. So we've got Ryan Reynolds' first taste of the FA Cup, it may be, versus Oldham. I believe that's the televised game. We've also got Woking Town versus Oxford United. So I'll be definitely cheering on Woking Town for obvious reasons. And then we've also got Torquay United, who are home to Derby County. So that in terms of size of clubs, we know Torquay, obviously previously of the Football League, but have been in the non-league scene as well. Obviously, it's going to be one of those matchups where you expect there to potentially be a good game there. I expect it to be quite tough. But yeah, I think nothing else otherwise stands out from those games. So I think we'll definitely have to reflect on Monday's show whether we saw any particular banana skins from those. But yeah, no, I'll be definitely fascinated to see what happens. So right, we're going to take a bit of a break, and then in the next section we will be talking about Qatar and some certain World Cup developments. Now, we're not very far from the World Cup kicking off, but off the pitch, Andy, we've been hearing of some rather unsavoury stories, it has to be said, and it's been over the last few days that we're seeing a lot more sight of these stories. So I know you were quite keen for us as a pod to kind of digest this and talk a little bit more about them, but from the kind of few that you have seen, what has been the most gruesome that you've come across?
Yeah, it's been some quite grim ones this week. I guess it's a bit of a trigger warning for anyone who might be affected by it, by stories of sexual assault. But there was widely circulated news the other day that a journalist who'd been effectively lured, Qatari local, who'd been lured to a hotel, had been. And as a result, sexually assaulted by, numerous other men, to sort of to make an example out of him or whichever. And it's just it goes very much in the theme of there's been an awful lot of talk about LGBT rights over in Qatar. Now homosexuality is illegal over there, and that's been known for many years now. In the lead up to the World Cup, the Qatari authorities have given assurances that members of the LGBTQ community can go watch the games in Qatar without any danger. The English FA have their own part to play in this. We're going, we've had the assurances that we need. It's absolutely fine. And then you're seeing a lot of these stories coming out. I think one of the officials on his official Twitter account saying, there is no room for homosexuality in this country. You have to respect our rules. You've had our own UK minister, James Cleverly, of our current government. And you say it was bad, horrendously worded. Cleverly said that Qatar was willing to make compromises to allow people who would normally prosecute to attend the tournament. Like, I'm sorry, but you shouldn't have to compromise just to let people with a different sexual orientation into your country. It's just it's essentially saying, don't be too gay while you're over there. And I know that's really horrendous language to use, but that's effectively the message that they're putting out at the moment. And I don't, if I was a member of the LGBTQ community, I would 100% not feel safe going to that environment. And I think there's one of the Athletic journalists, Adam Crafton, who is, who is a member of that community. He's openly gay, and he's the amount of abuse he gets whenever he posts about Newcastle or Qatar and their human rights record, especially to people with a homosexual leaning. He gets dogs abuse for it, and the reality is that despite all the PR that's out there, there is absolutely no way that I could see an openly LGBTQ couple going over to Qatar, and other than hiding it, being able to be comfortable there. And I think that's a real shame. And the fact we're having a World Cup in a country in which it's they discriminate so heavily, I think is outrageous. Now, in the interest of balance, Qatar are not the only country that have backwards attitudes against homosexuality. I think we've discussed before, Poland, who co-hosted the Euros a few years ago, they've got quite a few issues with it. Hungary is another country where they've demonstrated they've been outright violence against people of that community. So it's not just a Middle East
uncommon. No.
It's not just a Qatar thing. It's it's a problem that affects many countries all over the world, including our own. But I think maybe in Qatar, the fact they've got a World Cup in the manner that they have, and the fact they've not really tried to, and I think in terms of stances, I think one of the strongest stances against the World Cup has come from Beth Mead. Now, she's, for those who don't know, she's an England Euro 22 winner for the ladies, and she's also openly in a relationship with Vivian Miedema of Arsenal. And obviously with women's football, I've been watching over the years, it's a completely different culture there, and it's generally speaking it's okay to be to be bi, lesbian, gay, whichever, and it's a lot of them are very, very open with it. And you could, so she's come out and said, well, the fact it was there, she's described it as being the complete opposite to what she believes in respect. It's not something she'd be backing and promoting. It's disappointing it's being held there in the first place. And to be fair, it's a much, much stronger stance of quite a few of the captains who just said they'll wear anti-discrimination armbands. I'm like, what the fuck is that, man? An anti-discrimination armband. Like, if you're going to make a protest, at least if you go to the World Cup, fine, I totally get it. But, call it out, do wear the rainbow armband and go, you're specifically an ally for, for
LGBTQ,
show that you're an ally for that community by making a statement. I think there's just a lot of stuff that's started to crack through the PR machine at the moment. I mean,
definitely.
I think there's also another side of it whilst I'm at it is this has come, and Manchester City have done this as well a little bit, or sources from Manchester City, is that because there's been such criticism towards, Qatar and, their ownership with PSG, their human rights record. A lot of people have taken the line that it's the Westerners being xenophobic, and I think you have to be fair. I think there is probably some truth in that. I think there is a lot, especially over in what's going on with England and our government at the moment. You can't turn around and say xenophobia doesn't exist in our country, and it does. And I suspect there'll be a prejudice towards them because of that. But I think although it's a perfectly valid conversation to have, to use it to deflect on their own failings, I think is quite a poor show. So yeah, I think it's just a World Cup that nobody wanted to be. Nobody wants it in winter. Nobody wants it to be in Qatar. Most of the people don't feel safe in there. There's workers that have lost their lives, and their needs and concerns have just been overridden by the celebrity endorsements of Qatar. You've had the likes of Gary Neville and David Beckham, players who I admire greatly from my childhood, who I feel have made an awful move by essentially taking a shit to the cat to promote it. So, yeah, I think it's just disappointing, but very, very predictable.
Yeah.
News,
Unfortunately, yeah. And I think just to add to that, we've got the human rights element as well. So recently, the Qatari minister down there has dismissed the kind of funds that have been set aside essentially for the abuse that took place during the construction of these stadiums. So he's basically said that the compensation scheme is not going to exist. It's going to be pulled. He feels that there's some existing kind of rewards and schemes out there that are sufficient, and that's had a lot of heavy criticism, which just kind of highlights how many issues there are in Qatar. There's more than just what we're just highlighting right now. And I don't know, Andy, if there's any others that have kind of crept your eyes around the Qatar situation, but I suspect there'll be furthermore as the days lead to the World Cup starting as well.
Yeah, I think even Gareth Southgate, somebody who's normally quite careful and good with his words. He's been criticised by the Human Rights Group after saying workers in Qatar were united in wanting the World Cup to go ahead. I think that was a poor choice of words. Like, if a family member of mine died because of the way that they're treated in Qatar, building a stadium, I think the last thing I would be caring about is ensuring everybody has a good time. So, yeah, I think it's it's a disappointing comment for somebody who usually tends to be on the right side of these kind of arguments. But yeah, I think you're going to see a lot more of it in the coming weeks. You're going to see it during the tournament. I think it's just going to, like I said, I think the tournament's going to be a bit of a shit show, to be perfectly honest.
Oh, yeah. I mean, if it was to be summed up in one picture, I don't know if you saw it, Andy, the crates that were in the middle of the desert for a $260 stay vacation down there. So, surely nothing could go wrong when you've got that many crates together. And I believe from what I heard, and whether that's true or not, I don't know, but apparently right dead bang opposite is a bar. So, it's just inviting some trouble to take place, because although they are quite strict in terms of the use of alcohol down there, I expect fans will go there not knowingly, will just carry on and break the law, and then find out the hard way when they've got a huge fine plus being in jail in one of those jails. So, that kind of sums up this World Cup update, I suppose, Andy. I don't know if there's anything else you wanted to highlight before we move on.
No, I mean, I'm sure there'll be next week. But yeah, we can move on easy enough. It's fine.
Fantastic. Well, let's move on to our beloved Premier League. So we'll look at the kind of updates in terms of fixtures that are going to take place over the weekend. So we'll start off with Saturday. And I have to say, Andy, there wasn't too many to pull out of Saturday, but the two games that I did want to call out, one was something you mentioned, which was Leeds versus Bournemouth on Monday's show. Yeah. And then I've called out also Forest versus Brentford. But just to go through a run of the other fixtures, so we've got Man City taking on Fulham, Wolves versus Brighton, and then we've also got Everton versus Leicester.
I think, you know what? I overlooked that on Monday, to be honest. I think that'll be, because they're both quite big teams who not played too well this season. And, although Everton has shown a bit more solidarity, there's actually only 3 points between 18th, which is where Leicester City are, and 14th in 12th position where Everton are. Like, it's a big,
tight.
it's a
So
big.
tight.
I think it's a big. I think both teams will see it as a big opportunity to either steer themselves clear or drag other people into it. So yeah.
What do you make of Bournemouth's situation then? So Bournemouth are currently in 14th place, just above Leeds, and there's a 1 point difference. Leeds have a better goal difference ratio at the moment because Bournemouth minus 16. Can't believe that already at this stage. But
Most of
yeah,
that came against Liverpool, didn't it?
yeah.
Other than
Take
that,
away those 9 goals,
yeah,
and they might be in a
not
better
bad.
position,
Yeah.
right? But yeah, I mean, it's a must-win game for both sides, right? And Bournemouth haven't been playing too badly, I have to say. But I think it just is the bit of quality that other sides have over them, right?
Yeah, I think. I mean, with Bournemouth with the squad that they've got, I don't think anybody will really be. I don't think they'll complain if they go straight back down to the Championship. And I think the fact they anything above 17th will be a massive achievement for Bournemouth. I think it'd be huge for them. You know, they still haven't really got a permanent manager. They didn't really invest particularly heavily over the summer. You know, they've ground out some results, and I think probably, as my estimation is, as the season goes on, I suspect that, you know, once Leicester City start picking up points, which they have done in recent games, you know, Wolves, I can see Southampton and, you know, Villa with the new management, with under Emery, I can see them getting out of it. I feel that for that last relegation spot, I genuinely think it could be Bournemouth and Southampton fighting it out between themselves, two South Coast rivals. So yeah.
Did you anticipate Southampton to struggle as much as they have so far for this first part of the season?
Yeah, to a point, yeah. They've although they've invested quite a lot of money, they've put a lot of money onto a lot of untested, you know, largely unproven youngsters.
Yeah.
And you know, when you take that kind of gamble, you're essentially relying on them to come good as time goes on, or as the season goes on. And I think it's always been I think I speak to a couple of Southampton fans on the WhatsApp group that I've got for like COD and that, and they were both saying that they feel that, you know, Ralph's time's coming to an end, but but they feel that every time Ralph goes on a losing streak, he'll pull a result out of nowhere. You know, like they did against I think it was Chelsea, I think.
Yeah.
And so they have that capacity within them, but it's not a huge surprise that they are where they are, to be fair.
Yeah, the only reason I ask that is from the top of my head, without looking at fixture lists, I don't think they've played too many of the big sides. And that's what, if you're a Southampton fan, maybe a bit worried because obviously you've got a fair few like of the big clubs still to play yourself. And I'm just thinking maybe they've had the easier run so far. So to find themselves that low might be a bit of a struggle come to the second part of the season, but we'll wait and see. But the other game that I did want to call out was Forest versus Brentford. Now, the reason I've called that out is if Forest win and providing teams above them lose, they get themselves out of the relegation mix. I mean, I know we've been saying how, you know, Steve Cooper is trying to get something out of this squad right now, or trying to get some consistency. Could you see themselves pulling themselves out this weekend?
It's doable. They've
Yeah.
got 5 points out their past 5 games. Like, they've shown a little bit of grit and determination. I think the problem with signing 82 players and trying to find the best 11 out of them, well, 24, so I exaggerate. There's still a lot of players. It
still feels like 82, doesn't it?
It's two and a bit full 11s, more or less. So there's always going to be a hint of chaos with it, because of the best player in the world, when you've got 20 odd players arriving for pre-season and beyond, and you're trying to at the same time mold them into a coherent outfit, is a huge challenge. And I think maybe that's why Steve Cooper got the contract that he did, because I think maybe there was an acknowledgement that there's only so much he can do with the amount of players that were brought in, and they sacked all the recruitment staff. And I think they've had some absolute poundings in recent months. But they got obviously that massive result they got against Liverpool has given them a chance. And Brentford away from home don't tend to be particularly great, it's fair to say. And I think Nottingham Forest, they'll see that as a game they should win on Saturday. And I think given they've got, I'm saying they're also at home to Palace just before the World Cup. So I feel that the next 2 home games for them will be a good guide as to where they might end up, because those are the kind of teams on a home match with a crowd and the big support that they've got. To be fair, I think that will could potentially swing it for them.
Well, let's look into Super Sunday, as Sky Sports would call it. So we have got Chelsea versus Arsenal. I'm sure Rory's cursing that he can't make this pod just to kind of tell us how Arsenal are going to win this game. But we'll also talk about the other games. So we've got Villa versus Man United, Southampton versus Newcastle, West Ham versus Crystal Palace, and Spurs take on Liverpool. Let's start off with Chelsea and Arsenal. It's a bit of a strange one, because normally you find these fixtures to go either way. There doesn't seem to be equilibrium. There doesn't seem to be like a middle ground with these two. Which way do you think it's going to go, Andy?
Difficult to say. I think, Chelsea had an absolute stinker against Brighton. I mean, they're absolutely god awful. I think, to be honest, I could back Arsenal in this one, because I think Chelsea under Graham Potter still finding their way a little bit. They're still trying to find that correct formula to becoming a really consistent outfit. But those games tend to be absolute carnage. Like I've seen plenty of goals over the years, red cards, fights. It's a very feisty derby. So if I was to put money on it, I'd be like, yep, Arsenal, but probably I'm favourites for that one. But it wouldn't shock me if Chelsea turned up, put in a performance, and got a result.
And having said that, now that we've said it as a pod, it's definitely going to end up as a draw. So we'll discount everything we've just said now.
It'll be 0-0. It'll be a shit game. And we're sorry in advance.
Yeah, sorry, Rory. But yeah, let's introduce Villa's new manager, Unai Emery. He is now officially on board. He did take his first training session on Tuesday. He looks very, what's the right word? Energetic, it seems, from the pictures that were shown. Surprising, because it's Birmingham compared to Villarreal, where it was probably hotter climates. But Andy, what kind of reaction do you expect from this Villa squad? Because they've been doing quite well since Steven Gerrard has moved on. Obviously, they take on your very own Man United, who are in better shape now, it has to be said. And I think if I was a betting man, I'd actually probably tip Man United to win this match. What's your thoughts?
Yeah, I think, obviously biased, but no, I think I genuinely expect Manchester United to win that game. I think we've got, largely better players. We've got the quality in the squad, and we've got a coherent tactical plan to do it. And I think away from home, playing of a counter attack, which you probably end up doing on occasion, I think will suit Manchester United really well. So yeah, I think with the performances in recent weeks, I genuinely see us beating Aston Villa, and it's a game we should be winning quite comfortably. I think, saying that, I think we've probably picked a good time to play Villa, well, apart from when Steven Gerrard was still there, otherwise we'll be doing about 6-0. But I think, with Emery, we've only had like a couple of training sessions. It will take him a little while to get his ideas across. So I think, I can see that should be a comfortable win. But they have got the players to cause damage. Danny Ings, Ollie Watkins, quite a formidable front line. Coutinho was, especially in his Liverpool days, has wreaked absolute havoc on Manchester United when he's played against them in the past. And even last year, he was quite a bit of a forward on our side for that one. So they've certainly got the potential, and they've certainly got the potential. To cause an upset, but like I said, I'm reasonably confident that they won't. So we'll see what happens next week.
I'm going to quickly skim to Spurs versus Liverpool, because this was a game that you actually fancy Spurs to potentially beat Liverpool. I'm much of the same kind of feeling because of the way Liverpool have been playing of late. Let's get your thoughts first. So Spurs versus Liverpool. How do you think the match is going to pan out?
I think. I think whichever side makes the least defensive errors will win that one. They're both prone to a bit of a howler, and I think with Liverpool is struggling at the moment because I feel like they've lost a lot of that spark, especially midfield at the moment, which I feel is looking really, really lightweight. It feels like they're, with Darwin Núñez as well, like although he's got a couple of goals, it feels like he's been shoehorned into the side a little bit. And doesn't seem to quite fit the way that they want to play. So yeah, I think what you see with Liverpool is just that it's a side that's in obvious need of a bit of regeneration. And I think although on one-off games they can still put in fantastic performances, and trust me, like we as much as we rip apart Liverpool now, it genuinely would not shock me if we saw them in the semi-finals or final of the Champions League, because they are that kind of club that can get up for a cup game on a do or die occasion and put in a performance. But I think in the slog of a league season, trying to put in performances week in, week out, and having had 2 defeats on the bounce against teams they probably should be beating, I think there could be a bit of a struggle.
Yeah, definitely. I think the key here for Liverpool is the midfield, really. Thiago's bit of a glass legs moment. I think he kind of seems to be quite fragile at the moment. And he seems to be the player that they are relying on this season, alongside Harvey Elliott, to be fair. So it'll be interesting to see how that pans out. Like you say, I think it's down to who creates or has the least amount of errors for this match and who can take the most of the opportunities. We didn't touch on Son as well, because he had a horrific injury against Marseille. So yeah, he's out for at least 16 days because he's had to have straight away an operation on his eye socket, which that is horrific.
Yeah, I think there's going to be, we're getting to the last couple of fixtures now before the World Cup, and you do wonder if, like, subconsciously, some of the big names might not be going at it 100%, trying to avoid injuries and stuff like that, because it's not a very, very short turnaround. And I think I'm calling it now. There's going to be some big players that are going to get injured over the next week, like real big names. They're going to get injured over the next couple of weeks and going to end up being knocked out the World Cup. Like, especially as an England fan, it would not surprise me if, like, Harry Kane got himself clattered a week before the tournament. And
would not surprise me. I mean, I think right now you could almost make an 11, because if you think about it, Pogba's out of the World Cup, Kante's out of the World Cup, got Reece James, who is out of the World Cup, I think, right now, officially. Ben Chilwell doesn't look too great ahead of, because I don't know if you saw the scenes, he was carried off on Wednesday night even. So yeah, I think it's getting close to that. So fingers crossed. Hopefully a lot of these players still make it to the World Cup. But yeah, let's leave it there. So Annie, I'm going to give you a bit of a break because we're going to talk about Serie A for the last 8 minutes here. So Serie A kicks off on Friday night. So we've got Udinese versus Lecce. Udinese, who haven't been in particularly great form, needing to get some points here against a Lecce side that probably need the points just to make sure they're above the relegation zone as it currently stands. So that shouldn't be an enthralling match by any stretch of imagination, Andy, or for our listeners. But yeah, if you fancy something different, feel free to tune in on Friday for that match. But then we go into Saturday, and it's a bit more interesting because the big game that is on Saturday is Atalanta versus Napoli. Napoli, who've been in incredible form, but Atalanta obviously have also been in great form. Andy, just quick thoughts on this one. I mean, in terms of a matchup, this is probably the best you can get at this stage of the season. What do you think of Atalanta's chances?
They're going to have to be defensively really, really on it, which they haven't always been this season. They do have a habit of conceding some sloppy goals, but they're, both of them are in sort of good form. But I feel Napoli have just got so much momentum and the quality, most importantly, their way at the moment. I think I could still see them getting the result. Absolutely.
Yeah, no, definitely. But yeah, it'd be fascinating to see how that match pans out, because I do fancy this to be a score draw. I think it's going to be one of those games that potentially, I mean, because I'm just thinking Napoli might want to rest a few of their players that they played during the week. We'll wait and see. We'll see. I do expect Napoli to go there gung ho, certainly in the first half. Maybe to try and kill off the match straight away. We'll wait and see though. In the other games that do take place on Saturday though, we've got Milan versus Spezia. Pioli signed a new contract at the beginning of this week, signing on until 2025. He needs to get back to winning ways after that shock result against Torino. Currently lie as it stands in third position, but yeah, a good 6 points off Napoli. So a win here would be definitely welcome. We've also got Salernitana versus Cremonese. So Salernitana, as we spoke on Monday night, having a fantastic season so far against Cremonese, who are currently struggling. They're at the bottom of the table on level points with Hellas Verona. And then we've got Empoli versus Sassuolo. That should be an entertaining game because Sassuolo have been on not a great run, it has to be said, but this could be a chance for them to get all 3 points. But the big games do take place on Sunday, Andy. So we have got Bologna versus Torino, which doesn't sound like an enthralling match, but trust me, they can go hammer and tong at each other. We've also got Monza versus Hellas Verona, but these are the big games that I'm going to announce right now. So Sampdoria versus Fiorentina, one of those sides that back in your 90s and 80s, you would have said one of the top sides. These days, probably struggling in mid-table, but Sampdoria have been struggling of late. And then we've got the Derby de Capitale. So we've got Roma versus Lazio. And then we've got that followed by the Derby d'Italia, which is Juventus versus Inter. So, Andy, if we start off with Roma versus Lazio, we did speak on Monday's show about a certain Sergei Milinkovic-Savic missing for Lazio. But Roma, they have got the tendency to throw it away, especially when it comes to the big games. Do you think Jose Mourinho will have the edge over Sarri Ball?
Oh, I think I can see Jose shithousing a big win.
Yeah.
You know, although their performances don't always match up, they have at the end of the day won 4 of their 4 out of their 5 league games, and they have still got the quality of personnel, to be able to turn it round. There'll be Zaniolo. He's had a thankfully a largely injury-free start to the season, and I think he'll be a massive influencer in that one. But I think with Lazio, I think between those two, it's going to be whichever one. I know it sounds a horrible cliche, but whichever one turns up on the day, because they've both got players sets of players that they could turn it on, but it's just a consistency that both teams lack.
Yeah, exactly. Very true. And it'd be nice for Tammy Abraham to get on the score sheet for this one.
Yeah,
as well.
he's somebody I think he needs a couple of goals at the moment. They've not been flying for him particularly well this season.
Yeah, even if it hits him on the arse or something and goes in, that's all he needs, basically.
Well, I think in the Derby Capitale, that's all you need. It just needs to bounce it off your arse and go in.
And then finally, we'll talk about Derby d'Italia, which is Juventus versus Inter. Juventus seem to be in high spirits, Andy. I saw a certain Adrian Rabiot talking up the chances of Juventus, but we did kind of marvel at the wonders of Inter over that result against Sampdoria. In particular, Nicola Barella, who is on form. He's doing quite well alongside Lautaro Martinez. Which way do you fancy this to go?
Yeah, I think it'll be a really good game. I don't think Juventus are in the form or have the personnel really to really. I don't see them beating Inter at the moment. I just don't think they're in a place. They're not in good enough form. They haven't got. They're not playing good enough football tactically. And I felt, especially watching Inter last week in the form with Barella is on, Martinez having a good season, Lukaku coming back from injury, to boost up what is already a very strong team. And I feel like Inter should, although it's away from home, should be looking to win that. I really do. Juve at the moment are there for the taking, especially if you're one of the top teams in Italy right now. So yeah, I could see Inter winning that quite comfortably, to be perfectly honest with you.
We'll wait and see. Certainly, I think the kids at Juventus are going to be up for this game, but we'll wait and see. We'll review it on Monday night show. So, Andy, we're going to come to the end of this particular podcast. So before we lead out and say our dues, is there any other things that you wanted to say before we go into the weekend?
No, not at this particular point, but yeah, hopefully we have a good weekend of football, and we've got some great stories to catch up on Monday.
Brilliant stuff. Well, thank you, Andy, for your efforts today. It's been great talking to you. Make sure, listener, you subscribe to our Instagram account at Anglo-Italian Podcast. We are also on Twitter at Italian Anglo Pod. And make sure you also capture and watch our YouTube series on the World Cup. So youtube.com/the Anglo-Italian Podcast. I am now going to read out the signing out quote, and this comes from a certain Roberto Di Matteo on the FA Cup. And he said, "In the FA Cup, you always have to expect the unexpected." And with that, we'll see you next week. Take care, guys.